The janitor nobody saw. The marble floor of the interstellar corporate headquarters shined like glass under the warm lights. Every morning before the powerful executives arrived, a man pushed his mop slowly across that endless floor. His name was Daniel. He was a single father, a man who once had dreams, but now worked quietly as a janitor in the most important building of the city. Most people never noticed him. They walked past him as if he were invisible. He wore plain clothes, old, work boots, and his shoulders always looked heavy, like he carried more than just the weight of his mop. The executives in sharp suits ignored him. The alien visitors looked through him, and even the security guards only gave him short nods before forgetting he was even there. But Daniel did not mind. He preferred silence. He preferred to be unseen. It was easier that way. He had a daughter at home, a little girl who waited for him every night. He worked hard for her, and that was enough. No one in the building knew his story. No one asked. That morning began like any other. The hum of the cleaning drones filled the hall, the air smelled of flowers from the giant vase in the center, and the building prepared for a grand meeting. Alien executives from far systems were arriving to discuss trade, politics, and power. Humans and aliens alike whispered nervously as the delegation stepped through the doors. Their presence filled the lobby with a sharp and cold air, like the temperature had dropped. Daniel kept cleaning, his mop glowing faintly with blue fibers. His hands moved without thought, but his ears heard every sound. The aliens spoke in their tongue, a language full of sharp edges and strange rhythm. To everyone else it was noise. To him it was not noise at all. He froze for a moment, pressing the mop against the floor too hard. His heart gave a sudden heavy beat. Those words, he knew them. He had known them for years, though he never let anyone discover the truth. His wife, now gone, had whispered those same words once in the quiet of the night. She had told him secrets, words from another world, words that humans were not meant to know. Daniel's breath caught in his chest, but he forced himself to move again. He dipped the mop back into the bucket and dragged it across the marble. He tried to look like nothing had changed. He tried to look invisible again, but his mind was no longer still. The aliens walked proudly into the hall, their long coats flowing, their large black eyes scanning the room. They carried themselves like rulers of all they saw. Every human in the lobby lowered their head or stepped aside. None dared to interrupt or even speak. One of the alien executives spoke loudly, his voice echoing through the grand hall. The staff listened, but none understood. Only Daniel understood. He heard the words clearly, and each one burned deeper into him. The alien was insulting humanity, mocking them in their own house, calling them weak and primitive. He said humans existed only to serve, to clean, to obey. The other aliens laughed softly at his cruel words. Daniel gripped his mop harder. His knuckles turned white under his gloves. His mind spun with anger, but he swallowed it down. He had promised himself never to reveal the truth. He had promised his wife to stay hidden, to protect their daughter by keeping this secret locked away. No one must know. Yet as he looked up for a brief moment, he saw the human staff bowing their heads, pretending not to notice the disrespect. He saw the fear in their eyes. He saw the arrogance in the aliens' smiles. Something inside him began to stir, something he had buried for years. The janitor nobody saw was now seeing everything too clearly. He moved closer to the group as if still cleaning the floor, but really his ears were catching every word. The alien executive spoke again, louder this time, and the humans in the room shifted uncomfortably. They did not know the meaning, but they felt the insult in the tone. Daniel clenched his jaw. The words were sharp blades, and each one cut deeper. He thought of his daughter. He thought of the life he wanted her to have, a life where she would not be treated as less, a life where she would not bow her head in silence. He thought of his late wife, who had told him the truth about the galaxy. who had trusted him with the alien language. He thought of the promise he had made never to use it, but promises sometimes break under the weight of injustice. Daniel felt his throat tighten as if the words wanted to escape without his permission. He forced himself to stay silent, to keep his role, to keep the mask of a simple janitor. But the mask was cracking. His secret knowledge pressed against it like fire inside a glass. The aliens laughed again. The human workers lowered their heads, further. And Daniel's eyes burned with quiet rage. He dragged the mop one last time across the marble floor, then stood still. No one looked at him. No one noticed. To them, he was just a janitor cleaning floors. But if they had looked closer, they would have seen that his eyes were no longer the eyes of a man ignored. They were the eyes of a man who understood everything, the eyes of a man standing on the edge of breaking silence. The janitor nobody saw was about to be the man no one could ignore. The executive's arrogance. The tall alien executive stepped forward into the shining hall as if he owned the place. His long coat dragged softly behind him, and his polished boots struck the marble floor with sharp authority. His black eyes scanned the humans in the room, and his thin mouth curved into a smile that carried no warmth. He spoke again in his own tongue, his voice loud enough for all to hear. The humans in the lobby shifted uncomfortably. They could not understand the words, but they understood the tone. It was a voice full of pride and mockery. The alien's words rolled like knives, cutting into the silence. The staff lowered their heads even further, pretending not to notice, pretending it was only business. Daniel's mop stilled for a moment. His hand shook lightly against the handle. The words were clear to him. The executive was saying, humans were useful only as servants, as workers, as background creatures. He called them a young race, unworthy of respect. He laughed as he compared them to insects. His companions, standing tall and dressed in the finest cloth, chuckled in agreement. Daniel pressed his jaw tight, his teeth grinding against each other. He had heard insults before in his life, but something about this cut deeper. It was not only against him, it was against every person standing in the hall, against his daughter waiting at home, against all humanity. The executive raised his hand and gestured lazily toward Daniel. He made a comment in alien tongue, mocking the janitor for cleaning while great ones spoke. The others laughed harder, their voices filling the grand chamber with cruel music. The human staff forced fake smiles, but their eyes showed shame. No one dared to speak. Daniel looked down at his glowing mop, its blue fibers dripping softly against the marble. His chest burned with a fire that he could not put out. He remembered the soft voice of his wife, telling him words from another world, teaching him sentences no human was supposed to know. She had told him to keep the secret, to protect it, to hide it for their child, and he had obeyed. For years, he had swallowed the words, locked them deep inside, but hearing them used as weapons, hearing them twisted into chains of insult, it broke something inside him. He wanted to shout, to strike, to tear away their laughter with the truth of his tongue. Still, he held himself back. His eyes followed the executive as the alien walked slowly across the hall, speaking of contracts, of trade, of how much profit they would take from Earth. He did not care if the humans listened. He did not care if they understood. To him, they were beneath understanding. Daniel moved quietly, pretending to clean near the vase of flowers in the center. His ears caught every detail. He heard plans of using human labor for dangerous jobs, of buying influence with Earth's leaders, of shaping the planet's future for alien profit. The human staff, hearing nothing, only smiled and nodded nervously. Daniel's stomach tightened. His heart pounded with every word. His grip on the mop grew so hard his knuckles whitened. He could almost feel the voice of his wife in his memory, telling him not to be silent when the moment came, telling him to be strong when the time was right. And still, he hesitated. The executive stopped at the far end of the hall, turning to look at the humans gathered. His voice grew sharper, his alien tongue rising like a whip. He called them obedient, he called them spineless, and then he said something worse, something about how humanity would never rise, how they were destined to kneel forever. The laughter from the alien guards echoed like thunder. The humans bowed their heads deeper, shame crawling across their faces. Daniel felt something snap inside him. His silence was becoming poison. He had promised to remain hidden, but promises could die in the fire of truth. The executive's arrogance grew with each word, each insult, each laugh. His voice filled the chamber with contempt, and the humans stood small under it. Daniel's eyes blazed, though no one noticed. He was still only a janitor to them. The alien raised his hand again, his long fingers pointing at Daniel. He made another cruel remark, mocking the idea of humans ever speaking his language, mocking the idea that such a low man could ever stand equal. The aliens roared with laughter, their shoulders shaking, their black eyes glittering with superiority. Daniel's grip on the mop loosened. His breath came slow, heavy, dangerous. The words he had locked away for years pressed at his throat, begging to escape. His mind told him no. His heart told him yes. The executive leaned closer, speaking one last insult, sharp and cruel, certain that no one in the room could answer him. His smile stretched thin with arrogance. His voice cut deep into the silence, and Daniel, the janitor nobody saw, the single father who carried more than anyone knew, felt the fire rise inside him until he could not hold it back. He parted his lips. A single word trembled on his tongue, ready to strike the air like thunder. The arrogance of the executive had pushed too far. The silence was about to break. The first word. The grand hall had fallen into uneasy silence after the last insult. The humans stared at the floor, their hearts heavy with shame, while the aliens stood tall, their laughter still echoing faintly, like ghosts in the marble walls. The executive smirked, certain of his power, certain of his superiority. Daniel stood with his mop in hand, chest rising and falling, heat burning in his veins. He had been silent for too long. Every insult felt like a hammer striking against the memory of his wife, against the future of his daughter, against the dignity of his people. The alien's words clawed at him, demanding a response, and finally the response rose from within. A sound broke from his lips. It was a single word. The word rolled through the hall in perfect alien tongue. It was not broken. It was not weak. It was clear, sharp, and alive. It struck the air like a spark in dry wood. The laughter stopped. Every alien head turned, their wide black eyes focused on the janitor in disbelief. The executive froze mid-gesture, his smirk falling away, his mouth hanging slightly open. The humans in the room looked up in confusion, unsure of what they had just heard. Daniel's mop handle slipped from his hand and clattered softly against the marble. The sound seemed louder than thunder in the silence. He stood tall now, no longer hunched, no longer invisible. His eyes locked on the executive, and his voice came again. This time it was not one word. It was a sentence. His tongue moved with smooth rhythm, each syllable perfect, each sound exact. He spoke with the flow of someone born to the language. The words cut through the air, filled with strength and meaning. He was not repeating simple phrases. He was speaking with knowledge, with authority. The aliens stared as if the ground beneath them had shifted. Their bodies tensed, their chests rising with unease. None of them had expected this. A human janitor was not supposed to speak their language, not like this, not with such flawless command. The human staff gasped quietly. They did not understand the words, but they understood the power. They heard confidence, they heard defiance. They heard something they had never expected from the man who mopped the floors. Daniel stepped forward, leaving the mop behind. His boots struck the marble with new weight, new strength. He spoke again, louder now, answering the executive's insult in the very same tongue he had used. But Daniel's voice carried no mockery. It carried fire. It carried truth. The executive's face hardened. He snapped back in alien speech, demanding to know how Daniel dared to speak. His words came quick and sharp, but Daniel did not falter. He answered with equal speed, equal force. The language that was meant to humiliate now became the weapon of the janitor. The hall had turned into a battlefield of words. Each sentence Daniel spoke was like a strike, tearing away the mask of superiority. He did not just know their language, he knew their history, their proverbs, their sacred idioms that few outsiders had ever heard. The aliens shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting to one another. How could he know these things? How could a janitor speak with the depth of one raised among them? The humans in the hall felt something rising inside them. They did not understand the words, but they understood the shift. The room no longer belonged to the aliens. The power had moved. The balance had cracked. Daniel's voice grew steadier, stronger. Each word carried the memory of his wife, who had whispered lessons in the quiet of the night, who had given him this secret before she was gone. Each word carried the promise he had made to protect his daughter, the promise that she would never bow her head to arrogance. The executive stepped back slightly, his confidence breaking. His mouth opened to speak again, but no sound came. Daniel's last phrase cut deeper than any insult could, a phrase that spoke of knowledge only their highest scholars carried. Silence fell heavy over the hall. Daniel stood tall, his chest rising, with steady breath. His hands were free now, no longer clinging to the mop, no longer hiding his strength. His eyes were fixed on the alien leader with unshakable fire. No one in the room moved. No one spoke. The humans stared at him with wide eyes, pride mixing with shock. The aliens stared with disbelief, their arrogance shattered. For the first time, the janitor was not invisible. For the first time, every eye was on him, and for the first time, the galaxy would begin to whisper his name. The shattered illusion. The executive's black eyes twitched with unease. His smile was gone. His chest rose and fell as if the air had grown too heavy to breathe. The other aliens shifted in place, their long coats brushing the marble as they exchanged glances. They had expected silence from the humans. They had expected obedience. They had expected fear. But now silence had turned against them, filled with a human voice that should never have been possible. Daniel's words still echoed in the chamber. Each syllable had cut deeper than any blade. He had spoken not only with fluency, but with understanding. He had repeated sacred phrases that were carried only in the halls of alien scholars. He had shaped sentences that belonged to private histories, histories no human should know. His voice was calm, but calmness could be more dangerous than rage. The humans around him remained frozen, their eyes wide with awe. None of them understood the words, yet every one of them felt the power. The janitor, who had always walked unseen, was now standing taller than kings. He had torn down the curtain of arrogance with nothing but his voice. The executive finally forced words from his throat. His alien tongue came quick and hard, demanding answers, demanding explanation. How could this man, this low worker, speak their language? How could he know truths reserved for their kind alone? His tone was sharp, but beneath the sharpness trembled fear. Daniel answered with no hesitation. His voice rolled with control, every word placed like a stone in a wall that could not be broken. He spoke of their traditions, of their old victories, of battles sung in alien songs that echoed across their homeworlds. He spoke of things learned not from books, but from whispers carried across love, whispers from a wife who had trusted him with her people's soul. The aliens stepped back, as if each word pushed them away. Their illusion of superiority was cracking. like glass under weight. They had built walls of arrogance for centuries, walls that told them humans were beneath them. But in front of them stood proof that their walls were lies. The executive's voice faltered. His hands trembled at his side. He turned to his guards as if seeking strength, but even they looked shaken. They had never heard a human speak like this. They had never heard anyone outside their bloodlines command their own language with such fire. Daniel did not raise his hands, did not shout, did not move with violence. Yet his presence filled the chamber like a storm. He was a man with no weapon, but truth, and truth was heavier than steel. His face, worn from years of quiet work, now held strength that demanded to be seen. The human staff began to lift their heads. Their fear started to fade, replaced by something else, something dangerous to the old order. Pride. They had seen him clean their floors for years, always silent, always small. Now they saw him standing, as a voice of humanity, breaking chains they had not even known they wore. The executive tried again, his words sharp but trembling. He spat insults in his own tongue, trying to recover control. Daniel did not let him. His answer came faster, stronger, each word landing like a strike. He turned the executive's insults back against him, wrapping them in phrases so ancient and precise that the aliens watching grew pale. They had laughed at a janitor. Now they were afraid of him. The hall grew tense. The air felt heavy. The lights above seemed sharper, as if even the building itself leaned in to listen. The vase of flowers in the center glowed under the light, its beauty almost mocking the chaos unfolding. The humans stared with unblinking eyes. The aliens stood stiff, their arrogance collapsing. Daniel's voice lowered, but the power did not fade. He spoke slowly now, with words that dripped like fire into water. He reminded them that arrogance blinds, that mocking others brings only shame, that every race carries strength hidden beneath silence. His words were not only in their language, they carried wisdom they could not deny. The executive clenched his fists. His face darkened with anger, but anger could not cover fear. He had wanted to humiliate the humans, to make them small. Instead, he had been humiliated by one man who should have been invisible. His illusion of dominance was shattered, and everyone could see the pieces. The aliens behind him avoided his gaze. They no longer looked proud. They no longer laughed. Some looked at Daniel with suspicion, others with respect, but none dared to dismiss him. The illusion that humans were simple creatures had cracked forever. Daniel's chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. He had revealed himself, and there was no going back. His secret was no longer secret. His wife's whispers were now alive in his voice. His daughter's future now stood brighter, for silence had turned into fire. The janitor, who had been nobody, was now the man everyone watched. The executive tried to speak one last time, but his voice failed him. The words caught in his throat. The power he had carried into the hall was gone, and in that silence, heavier than any insult, the truth became clear. The galaxy would never again believe that humans were voiceless. The galaxy, stunned, the hall was silent, but it was not an empty silence. It was the silence that followed a storm, the silence after a structure had collapsed. The arrogance that had once filled the room was gone. What remained was fear, respect, and awe. Daniel stood where he had dropped his mop, his boots pressed against the marble, his shoulders broad, his eyes steady. He did not look like a janitor anymore. He looked like something far greater, a figure who had stepped out of the shadows of servitude and into the light of power. The alien executive could not meet his gaze. His mouth opened, but no sound came. The words that had once flowed like fire now died on his tongue. The man he had mocked, the man he had pointed at as proof of weakness, had become proof of strength. Every insult had turned back on him. Every laugh had frozen in his throat. Daniel's voice returned, low but strong, each word in their alien tongue. He told them humanity was not weak. He told them humans would not kneel. He told them that respect was not given to those who mock, but to those who stand tall. He did not shout. He did not threaten. His calm was sharper than any blade. The human staff lifted their heads fully now. Their shame was gone. Their eyes glowed with pride. They saw one of their own break the chains of silence. They saw the janitor who had lived invisible reveal himself as a giant. And in that moment, they felt taller too. The aliens behind the executive shifted uneasily. Some whispered among themselves. Others stared at Daniel with narrow eyes, trying to understand how this was possible. They had believed humans were a simple race, too young, too weak, too soft. But now their belief had been shattered. If one janitor could speak like this, what else could humanity be hiding? Daniel took a step forward. The marble rang under his boot. The aliens stiffened, their black eyes wide. But he did not move with violence. He moved with presence. His words rolled out again, reminding them of the arrogance they had carried into this hall, reminding them of the shame they now carried out. The executive staggered back a step. His long coat whispered against the marble. He tried to regain control, but control was gone. The humans no longer feared him. His own companions no longer laughed at his words. He had been stripped of power not by force, but by truth. Daniel paused and let silence return once more. His eyes swept across the hall, meeting human eyes, then alien eyes. He wanted them all to remember this moment. He wanted them all to carry it away, to spread it, to whisper it across stars and stations. A single man, a single father, had stood against arrogance and shattered it with nothing but words. At last, Daniel bent down and picked up his mop. His hands wrapped around the handle, and he lifted it gently. He dipped it back into the bucket and pressed it against the marble once more. The blue fibers glowed softly as he cleaned the floor. He returned to the role of janitor, but no one in the hall could see him the same way again. The humans stood straighter. Their hearts burned with a pride they had not felt before. The aliens left in silence, their heads low, their steps heavy. The executive walked last, his shoulders no longer proud. He glanced back once at Daniel, but Daniel did not look at him. Daniel only pushed the mop slowly, as if the world had not just changed, but the world had changed. By the end of the day, whispers would move beyond the walls of the hall. The story would spread across the city, then across Earth, then across the stars. A janitor had spoken fluent alien. A janitor had silenced the powerful. A janitor had reminded the galaxy that humans were not to be mocked. And when the tale was told in distant systems, in alien courts and councils, jaws would drop. Some would scoff, some would fear, some would respect, but all would remember. Humanity had spoken, and it had not spoken with kings or generals. It had spoken with a single father who cleaned floors. Daniel walked home that night with tired hands, but a strong heart. His daughter ran to him at the door, her small arms wrapping around him. He smiled as he held her close, his heart full. He knew the path ahead would not be easy. He knew the galaxy had been shaken, and shaking a galaxy always brought storms, but he was ready. He kissed his daughter's hair and whispered softly, "They will never see us as weak again." And in the quiet of his small home, the weight of the galaxy felt lighter than his daughter's embrace.